one of the things I like to do, I like to think of the scriptures as a kind of a sacrament. Okay, now that's not one of the 7 sacraments or the 2 sacraments or whatever, but my understanding of scripture is that it's basically sacramental. Something of this world, a text which humans have created through a process. It uses human technology, it uses human cultural resources and assets to create this sacred literature. But when we're using the sacred literature, it's also being used by God to bless, to communicate, as a moment of grace. Now, just as somebody can come up for communion, for example, and they may have very little formal theological sense of the significance of the Eucharist, but the imagery of coming to the table and receiving some of the food that's on the table and being able to drink from the cup, that's the primal imagery there. And people are touched by it, and God is at work. And they don't have to have a properly developed Eucharistic theology in order to be blessed by participating. Otherwise we'd all be in trouble, except for 1 or 2 people in the world who think they've got it sorted out. And I have a similar approach to Scripture. If we're approaching Scripture with an attitude of openness and trust, anticipating God is going to be loving and gracious and good for us, then the Scriptures are going to be an encounter of grace. We don't have to have a good grasp of the history, a good grasp of the compositional process by which the books were written, the canonical process by which they become authoritative on 2,000 years of interpretation and theological debate. Some of that is useful to have because it adds texture. It's like an art critic will get more out of going to the art gallery than somebody who doesn't have that art training. And similarly, we can all use the Scriptures. We can all misuse the Scriptures as well, but we can all use the Scriptures with an openness and almost a naive expectation. I'm going to read this book and I expect God's going to have something to say to me. Or we could also come to the book saying, now I can see that Paul is really dealing with a problematic issue of the church in Corinth, and so we have a more nuanced way of engaging with Scripture. And sometimes, despite our much vaunted theological training, something totally out of left field hits us, because that's the nature of Scripture and the nature of the God who speaks through Scripture. So for me, it's more of using Scripture is a sacramental and spiritual process rather than an argumentative or a legalistic kind of interpretive process.